Biofumigation it's a kind of learning from nature, as you could call it. Plants have developed mechanisms to be unattractive for herbivorous insects. Herbivorous insects are insects that feed on plants. And it works often in such a way that there is a non-toxic component, so a non-toxic component present in the plant, and there is in another compartment, and it's called the vacuole, there is an enzyme, and when they come together they make something toxic that is unpleasant for the insect. But this is the case, for instance, with mustard-like plants, but there are many other plant species as well, like Plantago, for instance, Plantaginacea, that's another group of plants. So they make it in order to be unattractive. And what you do when you use biofumigation is learn from this principle and exploit this principle for our own benefit. But it's in fact, it's a natural system that has been developed already millions of years ago. And we're just exploiting it, making use of it.
When we use oilseed rape in the farming system as a rotation crop for wheat, we get very much improved wheat yields. And we found that interesting because other crops like legumes, you might expect to be better crops, rotation crops for wheat, but the brassicas seem to have something special. So for a long time we've been interested in trying to understand what brassicas are doing that make them special. And that led us into this whole area of biofumigation, the fact that brassicas can release particular chemicals into the soil which can suppress some of the pests and pathogens and diseases. So we've been trying to harness that, try to replace some of the synthetic chemicals that we use in agriculture with some of these other biological approaches.
Well, biofumigation is of interest because glucosinolates, when they get broken down by proteins, enzymes in the plant, they produce these compounds called isothiocyanates. So I'm interested in the mechanisms of how this process occurs and what the constraints are for such systems. And more recently we've been working with microbial systems that can break down glucosinolates in the human gut and can give beneficial compounds that can prevent things like cancers. And in the soil, also we work on microbes that can break down glucosinolates. So we're interested to know, particularly in soil, how microbes impact on the process of biofumigation.
I'm interested in the control of soil-borne diseases, and in Switzerland we have just one chemical product that's still authorized. And anyway, I think it's not the right approach to use this kind of products. And the first time I heard of biofumigation 10 years ago, from Italy, so I said this would be a nice method because it combines not only the control aspect, controlling soil-borne diseases, but also had other advantages of green manuring, like improve the soil structure, being a cover crop. So it's really something, this kind of global approach, not a single thing, but it's more a whole approach to a problem.
The biofumigation started with the use of plants as a green manure or catch crop of some pathogen as fungi or nematodes. But even if the green manure is a technique that surely in the future in agriculture that is more sustainable, is a technique that had to be applied from the farmer, we have worked strongly to prepare even materials that are produced starting from plants of the brassicaceae, but really starting from the seeds, defatting them and producing biocidal pellet and meals that are a product that the farmer can buy in the shop and can distribute in a simple way than green manure that anyway remain the starting approach and even the cheaper approach for applying biofumigation. And in these last years, in addition, we have even defined and a new liquid product, both for foliar and root distribution, that give again the farmer a new option for applying the biofumigation technique that is my job.
My impression, and I suppose I've come into looking at biofumigation fairly recently, is that there's been just a few isolated groups, especially in the UK. And obviously, I was aware of work at Harper Adams. I can speak to Matt back here about his research as well. But I think bringing everyone together, there's some clear common problems, and some of these are technical problems. For the scientists, how do we really get to grips with identifying the best biofumigants for particular problems or particular diseases, and also the sort of problems that the industry face, actually just fundamental things like how do you actually grow the biofumigants. And I think that still hasn't been worked out, certainly for UK conditions.
I am strongly of the belief, I'm almost evangelical about biofumigants, having been deeply sceptical and then seen evidence ourselves, not just reading research papers and such from overseas, but to see it actually work in the UK in our situations, and even with the accepting failures, of which there have been many, I would say that biofumigation, without a question of doubt, is a fundamental part of future sustainable agricultural production in the UK, and that's the final line of that. I can't see us doing it without it, however long it takes.
I think there's lots of promise there. I think we're at a stage though where it's very difficult to predict how it's going to be taken up by farmers. I think there's good slots for it to fit into people's rotations, but I think unfortunately the problem with it is that we haven't got the agronomy knowledge there. So people really, when they're developing these and trying them, as farmers do, farmers are very good about trying new things and having a play. But because the agronomy support and knowledge isn't there, when they try these things, if they're not getting a good crop, and ultimately what people need to do is grow a really good crop of the biofumigant so it has the best chance of working. All too often they're not getting establishment, they're not getting good crop growth, and therefore they're just not getting the work. And that first experience is so important with these sorts of novel technologies. So I think in some extent we're at that sort of tipping point, and what we need to do is give enough advice to farmers that they're getting a good experience. I think there's plenty of work being shown at this conference that there's good effects there, but also there's been plenty of talks where people have sort of said, well, it didn't work, and when you unpick what they were telling you, you can see why there's, they didn't get the establishment, they didn't get the biomass, the way they've handled the crops has meant that they've not preserved the active components. But all of these things are things that are happening to farmers. So I think we need to be a lot better in terms of how we provide that advice.